I'm so excited. I've got the first man. I've got the first man in my podcast. And it was always my goal to have a mixture of women and men in the podcast and to hear about their stories. And Cyril, thank you for daring.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But the first step is already behind me.
Good. Yes, you said yes. That's the first step.
Exactly.
Cyril, I met you a few years ago. You were a colleague of my husband in a leadership position in a company, and this is how we met. And we kind of kept in touch. And then one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast was when I heard about your decision, what you did 12 months ago, or maybe a little bit longer ago.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to hear what made you change your path, what led up to it, and yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, right. That's a good starting point. I think the most recent, let me say, moment or of change that I can think of is actually something like 1.5 years ago, where I had, but that point was actually just the conclusion of a trajectory that started probably years earlier. And maybe we can come back to the past, the further past after that. But so yeah, I was actually doing a city trip by myself. I think it was something like October or November, 1.5 years ago. And I was in the beautiful city of Firenze in Italy, walking down the streets and seeing arts everywhere, great music, museums and stuff like that, lovely food. And then I thought, okay, this is kind of broader to my interest in life, or it corresponds to a part of my interest in life that I have had for various reasons to put aside in recent years, because I was too narrowly focused on my work. And I thought, yeah, that's just not the way I want to continue. I don't want that narrowness anymore. And that was kind of a realization I need to change something. What precisely to change took me something like 3 days to consider. Where, yeah, that's because it was the conclusion of, as I said, a longer trajectory. Yeah. But the moment that the fruit was ready to fall, it fell, right? So it took 2 or 3 days. I considered, yeah, should I do just a sabbatical and then go back to work? Or should I ask to work part-time for some 6 months or 1 year? Or should I just quit? And I toyed with those options for a few days, as I said. And yeah, then it appeared as obvious that I actually just needed to quit and see what happened afterwards. So the decision was taken somewhere in November, and then I announced it in January, and I worked until June last year, and that's the story.
Okay, so let me go in there, because you have you had 3 really interesting possibilities. Let's just tell the listener so what you did actually at the time when you took the decision. You were
I was the official title was Chief Product and Marketing Officer, meaning I was, let's say, a director in product management and in marketing at a software company. After being in that company, and I think that's also quite key, for something like 16 years, which it was the first private company for which I worked. Before that, I did some work at university, but never in a private company. So it was also quite an important company for me, because I could progress in my career and learn a lot throughout all these years. So I felt a very close bond between myself and that company. I think the situation is different if you're just for 1 year in a company, or if you've been there for 16 years, right?
Which basically now leads to, okay, out of the 3 options, you said in the end, you quit. The other 2 options are also interesting. Why didn't you choose them? Or you can put the question the other way. Why did you choose the one you did choose?
Um, so I think that is linked to other aspects than just the narrowness. So at the same time, I felt there are things. It's not just that I want to open more, but there were problems that I was having at work, disagreements, rather fundamental disagreements on some aspects, and they were, I think, because that can always happen, but they were important for me, especially emotionally, I would say, because of that close bond that I was feeling to the company and to what was happening at that company. And I was feeling to myself, if I just quit for 6 months, knowing that I will be back, I will keep all those issues in my head for the next 6 months. They will just not go away 1 second. Yeah. Same if I start to work part-time. Yes, I will have probably a little bit more free time, but those conflict situations, they will just remain. And I didn't see, after trying for a while, I didn't see another way out than just to say, yeah, let's just try something else. Let's quit. Yeah.
I can relate to that. When I went out of the corporate world, I had asked to have a holiday. So very simple. I wanted to go on a photo trip to Palestine, and my manager at the time said no. And it took me 3 days over the weekend, and on Monday I quit. And then they offered, that I could go on that holiday, and I said no, because it looks like I'm blackmailing you now. This will always be between us. I asked you for something, I explained it was important to me. You said no for whatever reason, I accept that. But my decision is now, I go a different path. So I can relate to that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So you did sort of teaser a bit. You said, well, it wasn't just sort of Italy and narrow streets and art and good food. It started earlier. Where did it start?
I'm not sure where it actually started, but I think that there have been different periods, and I think that's also quite normal when you're in a company where at some points you're happier and then other points you're less happy in your work. And that's all fine and part of the job, and that's absolutely okay. But as I was commenting on your Buddha on the wall coming from Myanmar, at one of those periods, I'm not sure when that was, maybe like five years ago, I was just feeling a general stress level and a little bit too much concern for work, not in a negative way for the company itself, but just for myself. The stress was a little bit too high. And then I tried a little bit of meditation and mindfulness and more than just a little bit, actually. And I'm still unsure on whether it was overall positive or negative, but this is the kind of questions that maybe never get an answer. But it definitely helped on the moment itself to calm things down. So that was one of the first episodes, and that was the solution that I found back then. What it was not doing was changing anything in real life. It was changing my attitude, which is all fine and well, and it is important. But it was not changing some of the issues. And so when they come back, maybe in different forms, it never comes back exactly as the same, but it takes a different shape. Then again, the questions come, okay, what can I do for that? And then you try different things and you manage. And again, it was all fine until suddenly I had the epiphany in Italy, and the things that had happened maybe were, I'm not sure how you say in English. There's a French saying la goutte qui fait déborder le vase. You know, something like that. It's a drop that
the last drop that vase. Sort of like brings it to overflow. Yeah,
exactly. But still, I think those drops, they came quite regularly. It's a question on how you look at them, and I realized them I think, quite clearly, due to also being a different country, and it's not just the arts, but it's about taking a few days off of your regular bubble for me, and then you can look at things in a different perspective. So yeah, maybe it started something like five years ago, more or less like that. It was kind of also the time where I did an MBA for work, and I think that MBA was also a two-sided sword, as things often are. And in some ways, it taught me a lot, and it gave me a different perspective on things and so on. And on the flip side, that different perspective also shed a light on things that I didn't agree with, and made it more clear why I did not agree with them. You know, but that was a period of quite, of course, intense stress, because you have to do the MBA whilst working. So that's not the moment to put everything in question. You just head through it and work your way through it. Yeah, so, and then things fall into place, I think, into their places after a few years, where everything consolidates.
Yeah, it takes time. It takes time for that.
Exactly.
Kind of like a seed, and then it needs time to grow. Now I'm curious. I mean, you had a very good position. You had a career. I wonder how your environment, your colleagues, your friends, how did they react to the fact that you said, well, I quit and I actually don't have anything lined up?
Yeah. It depends. It depends really from the people. I think the colleagues were, for 98% of them, just taken aback and so surprised, because yeah, after 16 years and not showing anything to the outside world, or to most people, about having doubts or whatever, they were just surprised and did not really understand. And then, of course, I could have some with people who really wanted to know, and I had good conversations with them, and then they could follow the decision, of course. And with the friends, I think it's different. I think they have more the perspective where they see that somehow you're too stressed or you're too concerned about your work, and they will not tell you necessarily, because they think, okay, yeah, I'm not sure if it's my place to tell him something like that. But then when I told them, they said, yeah, great for you, man. finally.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And one colleague told me that as well. Because he was seeing things maybe that I was not seeing myself, you know, and then he was not that surprised. He would just said, yeah, of course you're right. But most of them, yeah. So it was a mixture between, most people were just surprised. That's about the decision. And then the fact that I had no idea, that did not concern anybody. It was, okay, maybe a slight surprise for some, because you tend to leave a job when you already have the next one in mind.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have it, but at least you know what you want to do. And that was not my case, but that was also not the right move for me. I really wanted a time out, let's say. And that's what I did.
Before I go into that time out, I'm curious, because I could imagine a lot of people who listen go through similar things, you know. It's kind of like building up, they're unhappy, things don't change, can't be changed. Looking back over those 5 years, would you say that you could have done it differently? Were there moments when you, looking back, you say, well, I could have actually said something, but I didn't, because, or I could have tried to change it in a way that it didn't escalate? Or was it a situation where you said, no, it's, no, I probably would do it the same way again?
I'm pretty sure I would try to do some things a little bit differently. And I don't think it would have changed the final outcome.
Okay.
Yeah, I would, of course, because yeah, looking back, it's always easy to second guess and to say, okay, maybe I could have done it like that or said that at that point. But in the end, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it would have made a big difference. No.
Okay. Let me ask you that. Now you have your time out.
Yeah.
You have your space and it's not narrow anymore. You widen it.
Exactly.
What are you actually looking for in that wider space?
Congrats on the question. That's a very open question, as they teach us, right?
Yes.
About an open space and an open question. So I need to think. That's a consequence. I think my first move was unexpected for me. When I decided to quit, what I was envisioning was indeed going in that open space and doing the stuff that I was feeling I wanted to do whilst, for instance, in Italy, right? And in actuality, because I worked until the very last minute to try to close off things and so on, I actually, it dawned on me the moment I stepped out of the office for the last time that now things were going to be different. And the first thing was then, Cyril, you need to rest. And that was the nearly the only thing that that mattered at that moment. It took me by surprise, but it was fine because that's what the body and mind needed at that time. And at the same time, I would say that the other move was towards spending more time with family and friends. And that was all. So it was not really going into a more open space to keep with that imagery, but it was more about going back to a center, going back to some roots, something like that, and staying there for a while, you know. And then gradually, as time passes, as energy comes back, and so on, as I'm rested, then indeed I took an oil painting class because I had those paintings from Firenze in my mind. I started another instrument. I started learning a language. So going in those directions just to feel out what could be interesting. One of the big things I wanted to do in my sabbatical was traveling. And I would say that the first, so let's say second half of last year was just that reconnecting with what matters here. And so this year would have been the big trip. Yes. And then we had a surprise, a lovely little surprise in the guise of a little virus that decided that the trips would be for later. So yeah, that's also one of the things that you have an idea when you stop your work, and then things happen as they want themselves and not necessarily as you expected. And it's fine, you know, it's fine. I don't have any real regrets about that. It's just the way it was meant to happen, actually. So yeah, right now I have those ideas of trying to travel somewhere, but the options are limited. Let's say it like that.
Yes, and maybe it's like you said, it wasn't the time. You said you needed to rest and find again your center. I have sometimes the impression a lot of us we have also lost our center. How did you find it?
How did I find my center?
Yeah.
I think it was never gone. You know, it's in my case at least, it was always there, but there was that other center in my life that was work. And that tends to occupy many hours per week. that one, especially if, like is my case, I tend to not forget about it when it's 5 or 6 o'clock. I keep thinking about stuff and trying to see those problems that I didn't fix today, how am I going to fix them tomorrow? And let the subconscious mind work on them and so on. So when you remove that, a big part of what has been a center for many years disappears. And then it's just a question of remembering that it was not everything, that yes, there are families, there are friends, and there's a place where you live, there's maybe a region that you like to visit and to explore around you, you know, where either you live or where your childhood was and stuff like that. And so bit by bit, that is what resurfaces, I would say. It's not really about going out for looking for it, but it just once you cleaned out of the rest, this is what resurfaces at some point. Or at least it did for me. Yeah.
Was there anything that surprised you to refine, to rediscover in your center? Anything where you thought, oh, okay, really?
Not necessarily on a thing that surprised me or a someone, but the way how. Yes. Yeah, I by giving more space to for instance, my little nephew, because I have so many hours available, you know, for the little kid, it's great to have an adult who has lots of hours available. And that changes actually the relation you can have by giving it so much more time. And it was a very pleasant surprise. Yeah, that it could be so nice. It's not like it was a surprise that I had a nephew.
I hope you would have known that before.
No, I know that already. As he's already 6 years old, you know, he was already a known quantity for me, let's say. But that was a pleasant surprise. Yeah. Also, how also with some friends, you know, that by giving more time to some friendships, actually giving more time to all friendships, then some of them evolve and get a different quality to them. So yeah, the maybe that's the way to put it, is how some personal relations can benefit so much by giving them just a little bit more time, or much more time in my case.
I think that's especially in our time now, where the personal space and the relationships are being limited from the outside. I think that personal connection is so important, that picking up the phone and just asking how you're doing. And it's not, I find it's not a huge thing. It's not a huge effort. But like you say, it takes time, and it takes that, I'll give you an example. I did the training, and 2 days ago, I asked them to do a little act of kindness during the day. Just something small. And one of the participants said she was staying in a hotel, and she said, well, I took photos and I sent it to my family, and I said, I wish you were here. And I thought, that's really a little kind of like connection, building relationship with no effort whatsoever. That was really nice.
Yeah. And I think often we let tasks, to-dos, cover all of that, moving just from one to-do to the next to-do and working down our lists and so on. And of course, you can handle that while working, and you can reserve slots in your agenda and be deliberate about not forgetting people and so on. And that's often the only way you can do whilst you have a busy agenda. But in my case, it was just, with an empty agenda, that just came naturally, basically. You know, from the emptiness, let's say, arose those kinds of relationships and qualities to those relationships.
Was that emptiness at any point overwhelming? Because, I mean, in our busy times kind of thing, you know, there's so much to do, to get done, like you say, the to-do list. Was it, or how did it feel when there was nothing?
Not so bad for me, actually. I think despite trying to keep busy for as long as I can remember, I think I also always enjoyed half an hour out of doing nothing. I never had a problem with that. And of course, as I told you, I did quite some meditation and stuff, amongst which a 10 days silent retreat. And there you train being okay with emptiness. Yeah. And maybe that helped then during this period or not, but actually it was not a problem at all. I absolutely can relate to how it can be difficult to imagine for some. But I found that when I was in there, it was totally fine. It's something different compared to a lack of clear future plans. That is maybe, depending on the moments, it can be more uncomfortable for me to think, yeah, I have actually not really a clue of what I want to do in X month from now. And then I remember that I'll find something, you know, that it will not be a problem, that something will, but there are moments, depending on the mood, depending on the time of the day, where that aspect can be uncomfortable about the lack of clarity about what is to come. In the moment itself, I was absolutely fine with it.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you talk about those little moments where that lack of clarity might feel uncomfortable, what tools have you found for yourself apart from knowing something will come? I mean, that is one thing, but in that moment when that uncertainty hits you, what sort of like tools are you using? What mechanism have started working for you?
I think what happened, because I don't think I had something deliberate going on not really conscious, but somehow quite quickly I remembered that precisely that was my choice, and that this is what I had to go through. And that I had the feeling, let's say in my past life or in the past chapter of my life, that it was quite the opposite, that it was nearly like being on a train, or at least being on rails, you know. And that is comfortable, but it's the opposite of freedom as well, you know. And that's why I think, yeah, in those moments where the uncomfort, then I said to myself, yeah, that's just precisely, I know that it's uncomfortable, but this is precisely what I was looking for, or to say it otherwise, the knowing what next year will be is what I wanted to get away from. That's maybe more precise. I think that was one of the feelings or the pictures I had in my mind when I was thinking about what was wrong, let's say 2 years ago, was that everything was too much on a track. And that feeling of being on a clear track with little left. The track was moving forward. That was not the problem. It was not, I never had the problem of standing still, but it was moving forward, but it was always the same direction. And I wanted to get out of that feeling of being stuck on a track. And maybe later I'll go back on the same track. Maybe it will be a different, maybe no more tracks. I don't know. But I wanted to not be on the track for a while. And that is maybe the thought that helped me in those uncomfortable moments.
That's actually an interesting way of looking at it.
Thank you.
Well, it's kind of like, yeah, it's stepping out of the train and saying, well, this is exactly what I wanted. Now I need to deal with it. And
Exactly.
now, because you're saying, you don't know, you might step on the same track, different track, who knows? I'm wondering, where lies your passion at the moment? What do you love doing at the moment?
It's a super simple answer, this one. I just enjoy so much going to the tennis club and playing with friends and having a drink afterwards. And sun or no sun, I don't really care about the weather, but it's the feeling of doing sports and playing around and meeting people you like. That's it. That's really the one. That's the easy one. Next to, of course, as I said, seeing the family and so on. But the passion would be that, and it's discovering that even at 40 plus, you can still improve in sports if you just do a little bit less sitting behind a computer desk and a little bit more being active outdoors.
What is it about tennis? Because it could be
Why
now
tennis?
any sport. I mean, it could be jogging, it could be anything.
Sure.
What is it about tennis that ignites that passion? Because I can hear it in your voice. What is it about tennis?
Yeah, it could be other sports, of course, but for me, it's playful. That's what tennis is for me. It's playful, It's I did different sports when I was younger. I did a lot of gymnastics, and I loved it. But gymnastics is not playful, except in some moments where you decide, okay, now we can play 5 minutes. But in most of the cases, it's closer to work than to fun, and both are sports. You can't really do gymnastics if you don't train several times a week. Else, better not try, because you will hurt yourself. You have to repeat the same moves hundreds of times before you can move to the next one. Else, you risk hurting yourself. And so there's nothing playful about that. And in tennis, it's the opposite. You can just, irrespective of your level, you can just pick up a racket, pick a ball, and try to hit the ball and try to beat the opponent, or not run behind a ball like a little dog that's chasing a ball. There's just so many play elements in that sport, especially if you do it with friends and not in an official tournament. But still, I find really that's the play. Yeah, that it's the playful aspect that I like so much.
Now, before we started, you said there was something on your wall. And
yeah,
now the play comes in. Could you just read what's written on your wall?
I'll try to pronounce it in a more distinct way than the first time around. So, the body heals with play, the mind heals with laughter, and the spirit heals with joy.
So, would you say you're healing the body right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, and yeah, I'm not sure to what question that relates, but it does relate to one of your previous questions. In that open space, what I tend to focus on, yes, it's definitely the body. And I think it's kind of something that, even if everybody knows about the saying "mens sana in corpore sano,"
okay, my Latin is not that good.
Mens sana, so a healthy spirit in a healthy body.
Oh yeah, okay.
Something like that in English. Yeah. Everybody knows about that, but when you drive to work and back 130 kilometers every single day, that's not good for you. When you sit behind a computer desk, that's not good for you. Everybody knows all of that, And I said to myself, okay, now I have the opportunity to, even at 40 plus, to just take the time also to do more healthy things. And jogging, you mentioned jogging, so I also absolutely love jogging, but in the forest, for instance, because I found that also more playful as opposed to running around the track. I have problems with tracks now, as you can start to notice. And yeah, I've had some let's say injuries from the past, and to decide also to work on them. I did a little bit of yoga, And yes, the body plays, I find, an important point in reconnecting also to a center. Your body is always there with you. You know, that's also something in meditation where the center is in your body sensations, in your breathing and stuff. I think that was definitely part of it, or that is still part of it. Yeah.
And where does the joy then come for the spirit?
Hey, lots of things. Hey, playing with my little 6-year-old nephew.
Yeah.
There's if that's joy pure, you know.
Yeah.
And the kids have so much joy whenever they play at anything. It's crazy. So that's maybe the number one for that. And seeing friends, of course, and all the rest.
Yeah, but I think kids have a nice way of reconnecting you with your own little, I don't know, 6-year-old Cyril.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where you just sort of do that. Okay, that's lovely. Now, you did say at the beginning of our conversation certain things led and helped. Let's put it positive. Helped with the decision to quit the job. And it kind of started 5 years before you actually quit the job. You know, certain problems, you saw that you didn't see how to change them. Now, I could imagine that you wouldn't want to encounter the same sort of situations, that maybe the same values, the same rules, written or not written, maybe the same culture, where you say, look, I've discovered this is not for me. I am looking for that. And that represents itself in a company like X, Y, and Z, in a job that brings these sort of aspects, and maybe also in a leader with those qualities.
So I will start with saying that I try to make the distinction between, let's say, my perceptions of what I saw in the last years I didn't really like, and if there is such a thing, their objective nature. Because I know that my perception is necessarily colored by the fact that I've stayed so long in a company, and then I had just my way of viewing things, and maybe somebody coming with just 1 year or more recent would have seen absolutely a different reality. You know, I'm absolutely open to that. That being said, I think that one of the options that I'm considering right now is to do something like short missions or interim missions for a few months or what, in order also to, as a part of the discovery process of what I really want and what I don't really want. Because I feel that my perspective is limited due to the fact that I've known one company. Of course, I've met different styles of people, different leaders, but it was still only one company. So I would find it interesting to first confront myself to different companies in order to confirm or refine what I'm looking for. Because other than that, I think it's maybe the one thing in terms of values that that would be most important for me are something about a long-term loyalty between colleagues and with partners and clients and so on. So the opposite of short-term quarterly results and let's fix this quarter and then we'll see what we will have to do next quarter. I think the founder of the company had that long-term perspective. Of course, not everything was perfect, but founding a company, working in it for 20, 30, 40 years, he always kept in mind, yeah, in 10 years, I guess that he knew after being for 30 years in the company that he would still be there after 40 years. And that colors everything that you do. The fact that you know as a manager that you're not going to go away. And another framework and paradigm is companies where managers come there, work 1, 2, 3 years, and then move on to the next opportunity, which is extremely common as well. And by itself, maybe there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely not. And as I'm saying myself, I think that my next missions will also be short-lived, you know. But there is a value in sticking around for long, because I think that you realize then that you have to live with the consequences of what you do, and then you act differently. Ideally, of course. And it would be somewhere along those lines. So even if, so a concern for the long term, that's maybe a way to put it. I have a very good friend of mine who just changed jobs, and he quit a very large company, exchange listed company and so on, and moved to a still large but family owned company. And that gives such a change in perspective in the relation with time, when it's a family-owned business who says, no, yeah, of course this quarter is important. Of course we need to pay the bills. Absolutely. But we also want that the company is in a very healthy position for everybody in 5 years and 10 years down the line. And that brings with it a whole different perspective and values. I think, yeah, maybe I'm sure I can find stock listed companies that are absolutely great, but it helps when you have that focus on the long term.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that you would be looking for a company management and a culture that has a infinite mindset?
Yes. Yeah. And when discussing it, I'm thinking that it can take the form of the mindset and the values of the company, because only of the company culture. It could also be their outlook on what they're doing in the world.
Yeah.
So just saying, an NGO is concerned about not just the coming 2-3 months, but what is happening in their area of concern, be it environment or energetic or social justice or whatever. So to have a concern for the long term also in the impact of the company in the world. That's also important.
I find that, I did, when I heard about it, I found it impressive. I think it were the Native Americans, when having to take a big decision, they consider how that decision impacts 75 years from now, the future generations. So we're talking like 3 generations in the future. That's what they consider, and based on that, they take the decision. So I find that a very caring mindset, a very caring way of being. Okay.
Yeah, it also reminds me of that. That's more in classical management circles. They were talking about, I think it was Sony's vision originally, that they really wanted, like 50 years from back then, to have transformed how people looked at Japanese quality. It was seen as subpar for many, many decades. And one of those missions, maybe it was Sony, maybe I don't know, Toyota, but they set out with that kind of long-term perspective. And it's very capitalistic. That's just to look, okay, we're going to produce goods and we're going to sell them, and people will buy them, and it will be, but at least they had that longer term perspective to transform how people viewed Japanese quality. And I also find that can be something that's very invigorating for people then who work there, that gives them also a longer term objective. that gives meaning also to what you're doing. So the meaning can absolutely be capitalistic. It
Mm-hmm.
can be like the Native Americans, where they think about the children of their children.
Mm-hmm.
But the long-term meaning is quite important, I find.
Mm-hmm. What I also find with the difference between finite and infinite mindset when it comes to companies is that the finite mindset is about winning the game, being the best in their group, on the market, making whatever. But it's always about winning, and there's always an end to that game. Whereas when people come along and say, well, I actually see it as an infinite game that doesn't end at any point, it changes, like we're going now through a massive change since the COVID. The game changes, but the game continues at the same time. Rules might change. We might have to reinvent ourselves, but we continue. And I think that's what you also maybe, or what your friend experienced in a family-owned business, because somehow a family-owned business, they're obviously not just seeing long-term, but they're seeing like infinity. They don't say, well, in 50 years from now then, but it's like, well, as long as it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you that. With that in mind, with those values of, you said loyalty and long-term thinking, do you see that in the leadership these days? Or do you think some changes have to occur? Some change of perspective,
I'm hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that my MBA played a role in there, because I was surprised at the humanism that I was seeing in the teachers. And so the selection of teachers, of course, by the committee of that MBA, the chosen topics that were about way more than just strategic marketing or business finances or whatever, about ethics, also about how to manage self, and in a quite mindful way, about how to lead change. That the metaphor of the burning platform has now been revealed as, in many cases, not working, and because it just frightens people, and frightened people are paralyzed, and so that's not always the best. So basically, it opened me up to. It didn't open me up, but it confirmed, or it showed, that new trends in management look promising. And that I find that, of course, the system has inertia. Yeah, the of managers who grow through the ranks and who are taught by their mentors who maybe visited different business schools. But the fact that so many business schools today have a different focus in the lessons that they teach to a new generation, either of to-be managers who are 20-year-old, or executives who do an MBA, that's for me a reason for hope. Absolutely. And they could also bring around testimonials by people who try to do things differently in their company. I think we're coming from from a system that's focused on productivity and financial measures, and it's all fine and it's all required because you have to run the business. But it's not all there is. And I think that we are slowly but surely migrating to a different paradigm.
What advice would you give women who want to push into leadership position, who want to share the responsibility, who want to bring, let me call it, the female side of leadership, the caring, the sharing, the intuition, the collaboration part into leadership? What advice would you give them?
Just go ahead. Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, I think that the end of your question is quite important. So assuming that these are typically female characteristics, and I think that's how most people view it indeed, there is room for that, and there is maybe more room for those values today than there were like 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So I would also say, don't try to then play the same game as the sharks around you, and just go there with your values, because they're important and they're as effective, if not more effective, in the short term, medium term, and long term than the usual stereotypes of what is needed to be a leadership, to be a leader, to be in a leadership position. So often people think that you have to be some kind of imposing personality, dominating others, and playing political games and so on, which is one way to do it. In some cases, it's required, absolutely. But there's definitely a lot of space for another way to handle it. That is also maybe more the way how I view a sports coach. A sports coach is also there for the long term, for taking care of their sports men and women, and coaching them in a very human way and so on, and motivating them. And you need to play, and to, of course, always be careful about who you're interacting with, and how you as a manager tailor how you behave to the people you're interacting with. Mm-hmm. Some people maybe need sometimes a little bit more authority, and that's fine. Some people need more freedom and understanding. Some need more empathy. And I think it's also important to be able to recognize what does the people in front of me need mm-hmm. from me as a manager, and then to tailor your own attitude a little bit, of course, without losing your own personality, mm-hmm. but still fine-tuning it a little bit. I think mm-hmm. That's maybe what I would say, but definitely go for it, and don't change too much to become a manager, but change what people perceive what a manager should be in the process.
That's a really nice way of looking at it. I mean, I would also not say those characteristics are women. I would just say they're female. I think
right.
Some men have them, and some men are more in terms of collaboration and caring and sharing and mm-hmm. intuition. And some women are more goal-driven and organization and structure, and
absolutely,
there we go. So it's not. I wouldn't want to fix it onto the sex of the person, but literally on the inside. I mean, the yin mm-hmm. and yang part. Mm-hmm. We have both of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's really important, because one of the impediments to that is that some people tend to confuse the two, and to think this is linked to what it means to be a man, or this is linked to what it means to be a woman. And reality is way more subtle than that. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to, as you said, not be fixated on those assignments.
Mm-hmm. Cyril, I can't thank you enough that you came and you talked and you shared a bit of your path, which I find a daring path, a path that helped you to get out of the narrow track onto a wider area, that brought back play.
Yeah.
Joy. And I wish you that you keep having that and expanding on that and finding that. Plus the third one was the laughter.
Yes. We had already a few of that in the conversation.
I mean, if I was to lose my laughter, oh my God, that would be, no. So I hope
not gonna happen.
I hope not. But I wish you from the bottom of my heart, very sincerely, that you have those three parts in the next phase of your life, and that you find what you're looking for, whatever that might be. Thank you, Cyril.
Thank you very much, Anya. Thank you for having me. It was a really great conversation, and I'm so honored to have been the first man on your show.